Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us. We are holding in the middle of chapter 12. As I start, I would like to dedicate this study to those who have been taken captive and are suffering. Many of them are injured people who are desperately relying on medication. There is a father with a special need teenage girl that would took her to that gathering or concert, and they can't find them. So she was in great needs of medication continuously. Many people are suffering tremendously. So let's hope that God will heal all the mitzvot that are being done. And there is a true awakening among the Jewish people to connect to God. And he will perform miracles, show us the miracles, and bring a little bit comfort to all the pain and suffering. I want to summarize the 3 points I showed last week, because we still have to read it in the text, and then we'll go to one more point this week, hopefully. Last week we spoke about that a human being is a unique creature where the brains, the head controls the body. When that does not happen, there can be one of two reasons. One, the heart convinces the brains that it's not so bad, puts them in a gray area, puts them in the dark, and he's running the show, convincing the brains it's not so bad, it's the right thing, it's temporary. Another situation is an addiction where the heart has successfully done so many times that the brains is unable to control, just like an addiction, of mental addiction. However, we need to understand, and again, I'm not speaking of someone who is in an addiction that he needs medical attention and help, because then I will encourage him to seek help. We're dealing with an average person whose inappropriate behavior is within the spectrum of being able to control that behavior. So we need to know that as long as we allow the brain has full control over the body. If the brain is allowed, it can tell the heart, stop it, don't hurt, don't retaliate, don't think, don't do what you want. He has the full control. That's point number one. Point number two is the difference between light and darkness. It was divided into 3 points. One, light and darkness is no contrast. There is no war between two forces. Darkness is only where there is no light. If there is light, darkness runs away, hides. We saw last week on Shabbat, there were forces of light and darkness. As soon as the forces of light came, the reason they succeeded is because darkness is taking over when there is no light. As soon as the soldiers or the forces came in, they ran away. Just like with all their training and the units, special unit, commando units, etc. You read more and more stories how they were cowards and running away and hiding. The second point of light versus darkness is light is not, you don't need lots of light to dispel lots of darkness. A room full of darkness, one match will dispel all the darkness. And number three, when there is a contrast, always the light will win. There will never be a time darkness can win unless light chooses to go. If light is here, light will be the winner all the times. Why is it important? I shared with you, as we'll read it quickly today, that in order for us to fight darkness, we don't chase darkness with sticks, but with light. We don't fight it with lots of light, just a little. I shared with you last week the example of the student who was selfish, and the Rebbe said to her, for 2 weeks, practice helping another colleague, another student in the dining room. And in 2 weeks' time, she became selfless. because little match, little positive dispels a lot of darkness. I also share with you the Rebbe told a yeshiva boy who says he cannot get rid of evil thought or negative thoughts. And the Rebbe asked him, what did you do? He said, I'm trying to stop it. I said, no, it's bad. And I chases away, but a minute later it comes back. The Rebbe says to him, obviously it comes back. You're trying to chase darkness with sticks. How about think about what you studied in the morning? Just concentrate on light, and that will get rid of the darkness completely. This method, this idea is the nature of the DNA of our humanity. And it helps us understand that in our challenges, if I'm challenged to scream or to retaliate, one way is to stop by forcing myself to stop. Another way is to divert my thinking process into something else, and therefore completely forgetting about the situation. And the last point we spoke about is the heart itself. The heart by nature has urges. Those urges are negative urges. I shared with you that I'm no different than anybody else. I am not passing judgment. I speak of myself. I face the same urges as everybody else. An average person who is not holy, is not a rabbi, is not righteous, is not dressed in white, does not grow a beard. We all have same urges. You may be Jewish, you may be not. You may be a male and female. I think there is a difference, but that's for another time. But generally speaking, we all have urges. We all have desires. The one who do not face urges is the righteous man, because he was able either to tame completely the evil soul or rid himself of the evil soul. Meaning, I have desires to stay in bed late. I have a desire not to be kind. I have a desire to stay away from, to be antisocial. I have a desire to mock and make fun of people. The idea of a Benoni, someone who do not sin, the goal of our life, is not to get rid of those urges, because it ain't going to happen. The idea of our life is to control it, tame it in a way, confine it, so to say, to the heart, and not allow it to spill into thought, speech, and action, to the garments of the soul. Now we know why we had to understand and learn so much about the garments, because the garments is a total separate entity from the actual heart. And the heart has desires. As long as we don't allow it to spell out in action or speech or in thinking, we are doing fine. If we are able to read all those 3 points, today we will talk about machshava, about thought, our intelligence, how powerful it is, do we have control over it or not? It will be the topic of the last part of chapter 12. Yes, Lee.
Are urges and the Yetzer Hara synonymous, one and the same, or different?
Yeah, they are. The urges come from the Yetzer Hara, from the evil desire. This is what we studied thus far, but we didn't read it in the text. Now we're going to read it, so you'll hear it over again. Page 181 towards the bottom. Because the rabbi is talking about the idea that the brain always controls the body. Because the brain rules over the heart, as it is written in Raya Mehemna Parshat Pinchas. Raya Mehemna is a part of Zohar by virtue of its innately created nature. In other words, says the Rebbe, for man was so created from birth that every person may, with the power of the will in his brain, that is, the will created of his mind's understanding, restrain himself and control the drive of his heart's lust, preventing his heart's desires from finding expression in deed, word, and thought. When the mind understands the evil inherent in such deed, word, or thought, and he can, if his mind wills it, divert his attention completely from that which his heart craves and turns his attention to the exactly opposite direction. So no matter how strong the urges are, we are able to tame it, control it, and say, that's not for me. That's not no action, no thought, no speech. This principle of mind over heart holds true even where the restraint of one's desires is dictated by simple logic, without motives of holiness. The demands of the mind's logic are alone sufficiently powerful to steer one's attention in a direction diametrically opposite to that which his heart craves. In other words, before we talk about holiness, it's simple common sense. The way our body is built, the brains can say, that's not right. Don't do that. However, if this is true, whatever his motives, it is true, particularly in the direction of holiness. When motivated by the knowledge that his lustful thoughts are sinful and thoughts of Torah and mitzvot good and praiseworthy, one seeks to divert his attention from the former to the latter so that both his goal and his motives are holy. His mind's will is particularly effective in mastering his heart and thoughts. How much more so, says Rabbi, if you know it's a mitzvah and you serve God by stopping the heart's desires. Thus it is written, then I saw that wisdom surpasses folly as light surpasses darkness. Now the Rabbi is going to talk about the second idea. Clearly, the use of analogy indicates that a difficult and unfamiliar idea is to be clarified by comparison with a simple familiar one. However, nothing seems to be gained by equating wisdom and folly with light and darkness. Both are equally comprehensible. When King Solomon compares light and darkness versus wisdom and folly, it doesn't make sense because one is supposed to teach us, shed light into the other and have a better understanding, but both of them are common sense. You know the difference between light and darkness. You know the difference between wisdom and folly, says the Rebbe. Even assuming that the reference here is to a deeper aspect of wisdom, namely holiness, as is Ecclesiastes' depiction of man's inclination for good as a poor and wise child, and that folly refers to evil, as in this portrayal of evil inclination as an old and foolish king, there is still no need for analogy. Clearly, holiness is vastly superior to evil. Rather, the Alter Rebbe goes on to explain the analogy is used here to illustrate how wisdom is superior to folly. The superiority of light over darkness is manifest in the ability of a tiny ray of light to banish a great deal of darkness. Furthermore, the light need not battle darkness to banish it. The darkness disappears as a matter of course with the appearance of light. In the same way is the wisdom of holiness superior to the folly of evil. A mere ray of holiness suffices to banish as a matter of course a great deal of evil folly. Just like I explained to you, the Rabbi wants to teach us that wisdom, meaning brains or holiness, versus folly, which is the heart, which is the evil inclination, will disappear just like when you have a country, or you have light versus darkness. Light versus darkness, there is no contrast, no contest, because whenever light appears, darkness runs away. There is also never a war between them, and finally, it's a very little light that takes away all the darkness. That's the idea of wisdom versus folly in the evil inclination versus godly. This analogy means that just as light has superiority, power, and dominion over darkness, so that a little physical light banishes a great deal of darkness, which is displaced automatically and inevitably without any effort on the part of the light, so is there driven away automatically much foolishness in the klipa and the sitra achra of the animal soul located in the left part of the heart. So when I want my children to stay away from trouble, instead of telling them don't get involved in bad behavior, I fill their time with being busy in a positive way. I make sure to make them have good friends instead of telling them don't befriend bad people. So when I go to yeshiva, when I choose a yeshiva, especially in an older age where I have very little control, My choice is a yeshiva that will have extracurricular activities so that during break time, they do not find the time. They just don't have the time to get in trouble. I was a troublemaker as a child. I was kicked out of yeshiva a few times. The only way I found myself when I decided to get in line, so to say, is to get busy at my extra time. Whenever the time was free, breaks, doing breaks in the evenings, to be busy with a project. When I moved to America, I became part of a group that was, I'm not going to go into details, where I learned how to type, and with a typewriter, then there was no computer, and I would type, and people would pay me to type. I needed the money. My parents couldn't support me. I needed the money for various, for everything. However, in addition to that, the reason I learned how to type is because I knew if I wouldn't have a, so to say, an obligation during break times, I will get involved in bad behavior. And with my children, I had a child, one of my children, it happened many years back. During break, he found, I'm not going to say it, but he did something extremely out of character, extremely so bad that when the dean of the yeshiva found out, he told him and his partner, there were two boys, to go to the airport and go back home. When he called me, my son, he was crying. I said, "No, don't worry. I'll get a ticket. I'll book you a ticket." And he came home. He was home for a week. However, when I went back, by the way, that yeshiva didn't work for him. This was after Passover, and they agreed to keep him for the end of the year till June. And after that, I picked him out of that yeshiva. Let me go into it. What I wanted to say is he was deserving to be kicked out, and he was home for 4 days. It caused him gave him a lot of time to think about his behavior. But when I was negotiating back with the dean, I said to the dean, "What do you offer him during lunch break, an hour and a half time? What did you offer him?" He said, "Nothing." He said, "This child wanted to play sports, play basketball, and he needed it for his body, he needed it. And you were not letting them. You said it's not good. So what did you want from him?" And he says to me, "You know what? You make a point, so we'll take him back." And they took him back, but at that time already it was not a good fit. So I said to them, "I just need you, because in the middle of the year, you do not change. Nobody will accept him." I said, "He's there until the end of the year, but by the end of the year, it will be over."
Did he play basketball?
Huh?
Did he get to
No,
play basketball?
I wish that was the power. All right, back to our discussion. So when you want to get out of trouble, you get busy positive. If you say to yourself, "Let me stay away, I will not do this," it's not going to work. And that's why Chabad rabbis are always busy. One can ask, why are they so busy? And maybe they are a little bit overworked, and at times for sure. But there is one thing I tell people: imagine if I had extra time. Do you know what kind of trouble I would get into?
I would like to see that.
No, it's not a joke. So when we are busy, when we are so overworked, it becomes a blessing. The light dispels all darkness. We have no time for darkness. That's why I tell my children that they need to I monitor not the times they study in yeshiva, because for that they have teachers, but I more importantly monitor the times when they have off, summertime, in between classes. Are there some things for them to do? If not, who knows where it's going to lead them. And therefore, says the Rebbe, that's the comparison of wisdom versus folly to light versus darkness. Light will never have to fight darkness. Light comes, darkness goes. Light, one match, takes care of all the darkness. And anytime you have if there is a contest, it doesn't even start because light always wins. That's the difference. That's the brains. That's the wisdom versus heart, which is folly. The brains, as soon as the brains is steadfast in a resolute, that's the right thing. I want to wake up by a certain hour. I want to be able to be kind. I want to study so much. I want to connect. I want to graduate. I want to take a job. We will be able to do it. It's the heart that will, as soon as we're busy or allowing the space for the positive or the light to take control, there is no challenge, so to say. The darkness doesn't exist. As indeed, page 184, as indeed our sages say, a man does not sin unless a spirit of folly enters him. There is a statement in the Talmud that the only way for a man to sin, meaning to cut himself away from God, is only because the spirit of folly enters him, meaning the heart took over and not the brains. Thus, our sages describes the desires of the animal soul as folly. Hence, they are automatically banished by the wisdom of the divine soul that is in the brains, which desires to rule alone over the city, the body, and to pervade the entire body by means of its aforementioned three garments, which are, namely, thought, speech, and action, connected with the 613 mitzvot of the Torah, as discussed above. In the Beinoni, this desire of the divine soul in the brain, that it alone pervade his thought, speech, and action, and hence his entire body, controls the lustful desire which the animal soul arouses in his heart. Moreover, it prevents their actual expression because of the natural supremacy of the mind over heart and of holiness over evil. But if the divine soul of the Beinoni indeed dominates his every area of practical expression, alone dictating his every thoughts, word, and deed, why is he not considered a tzaddik? The Alter Rebbe will explain. Nevertheless, he is not deemed a tzaddik at all. Why? For this dominance that the light of the divine soul has over the darkness and the folly of the klipa of the animal soul, which is automatically dispelled, is limited to the divine soul's aforementioned three garments. Only in thought, speech, and action does the divine soul of the Beinoni dominate his animal soul. But the essence and core of the divine soul does not dominate the essence and core of the animal soul deriving from the klipa. Says the Rebbe, Beinoni will have the equal powerful engines of godly and animal. Both are very strong engines, and those engines are on full throttle. They are fighting, they are trying to control. The godly soul will take over the body, but the animal soul engine is still running, and therefore it will try continuously to convince the person to sin, to allow the garments to go under its control. And the Beinoni, a Beinoni is someone who will not allow and stop the animal soul ruling in the thought, speech, and action.
Rabbi, the tzaddik has no animal soul.
The tzaddik has no animal soul. He does not have that problem. Most of us will have this problem, and the goal is to get to a Beinoni where we have full control. Full control is not eradicating. Full control is no desires. Full control is not wanting to be good, bad. Full control meaning, despite what I want, I will do something else. I will speak differently. I will think differently. After prayer, for in the Beinoni, the essence and core of the animal soul originating in klipa, which is lodged in the left part of the heart, remains undisturbed, not displaced by the divine soul. After prayer, when the burning love of God is no longer in a revealed state in the right part of his heart, as it was during prayer when the love glowed openly and was palpably felt there. Rather, the love is after prayer only, and inside his heart is inlaid with hidden love, meaning that love which is natural to the divine soul, not the revealed love born of meditation that the Beinoni experiences during the prayer, but a natural hidden love of God, as will be discussed further in chapter 18, that in the heart of every Jew lies hidden natural love of God. Says the Rebbe, then after prayer, when the love of God is no longer revealed in the heart of the Beinoni, it is possible for the folly of the wicked fool, that is, the animal soul, to reveal itself in the left part of the heart, craving all physical matters of this world, whether permitted, except that they should be desired and used as means of serving God, whereas at this time the Beinoni craves them for their own sake, for the pleasure they provide, or whether prohibited, God forbid, as though he had never prayed. This is the third point I spoke about in the Beinoni. When you pray, you're connected to God. When you're connected to God, you love towards God, you long in connection to God is there. The animal soul is not going to start up with you. After prayer, what happens? That revealed love, connection to God is gone. It's hidden. What happens now? The animal soul is starting to try and control, convincing you to think or speak or act inappropriately. If you're a Beinoni, you'll stop it, you'll cut it, you'll fight it, but it's there continuously. So now we have the third point. Now we're going to go to something new that we did not discuss before. And therefore, we need to know the heart will desire continuously evil behavior. A perfect human being, from a Kabbalah point of view, is the Beinoni. That's perfect, meaning stop it and don't allow it to control you. But the fact that we have those desires is not a reflection of my personality. It's the way God created us, because he wanted us to have this type of heart or evil soul so we can overcome and fight it. Is that clear so far? Now let's talk about intelligence, wisdom, machshava, thoughts, thinking process. So I'm going to show you some stories and get you some information. A summary of what we are about to read. We already discussed, and by now you are an advanced Kabbalah students, because you know there are 3 garments to the soul: thought, speech, and action. I'm going to show a few rules. One of the rules is the more internal garment it is, the less control we have over that. The more internal the garment is, the closer it is connected to the soul, and therefore controlling it becomes hard or impossible. Is that clear? Now, point number 2. Garments. What is garments? Garments is an external added aspect that enables me to achieve goals. If I wear a suit and tuxedo to a dinner, I look good, people respect me, I draw attention, but I can take it off and put something else. That's exactly what the garments of the soul. They can be changed. I can be speaking kindly, I can be joking, I can be speaking out of sadness. It all depends on my mood and my desire. When it comes to thinking, thinking is compared to a turtle. The turtle has a house, right? The turtle's shell. Can he be separated from that shell? What do you think?
No,
Why not?
it dies. It's attached to it.
Because it's called a garment, but that garment is part of the turtle itself. You take it away from the turtle, you kill the turtle. The turtle cannot survive. There are type of garments by us that there is no stop, and there is no way I can not have it. When it comes to action, I can refrain from acting. When it comes to speaking, I can refrain from speaking. Can you refrain from thinking? If I were to make up an exercise asking you for not 60 seconds, 45 seconds not to think about anything, can we do that?
No.
No.
Why not? It's impossible. There was a man who came to the rabbi and he says, Rabbi, why are you so lucky? You speak and talk to Elijah the prophet. I want to. So the rabbi says, of course, I have an idea. I have instructions that you follow. You'll be able to speak to Elijah. He says, for 7 days you must fast, eating only before sunrise and after dawn. Then for 7 days, after the 7 days of fasting, for 7 days you have to read the whole book of Psalms 7 times. After that, you need to go to the mikveh, to the bathhouse to purify yourself, and you have to dip yourself in the mikveh. Now, how many times? 7 times. But the 7th one, you're not allowed to think about white bear. What do you call the bears in Alaska? Polar bear. For the seventh dipping, you cannot think of a white polar bear. Do you think he was able to do it? Why not?
That's the only.
Suggestion?
Because we have no control over our thoughts. If you think you have control over your thoughts, this point proves it. You can't. Says the Rebbe, as the Rebbe is going to talk about, when I have evil thought, there are 2 types of evil thought, by the way. There is one negative thought, thinking about committing a crime, thinking about not nice, thinking not inappropriately, which is a sin. But then there is another thought that disturbs us from doing positive. On a positive note, let's say I want to pray and I want to concentrate in my connection to God, it's meditation. And those negative thoughts enter. Suddenly the stock market comes in and all the fights I had with my spouse last night. I told you many times, there was a rabbi who, I'll tell you 2 stories. One I shared before. There was a rabbi who watched his students finishing the Amida prayer. And when the boy did the 3 steps back, he went to him and said, Shalom Aleichem, welcome back. Today's Torah reading, don't forget to say the blessing of a gomel. There is a special prayer when you fly over the ocean that the guy says, why are you saying that? I didn't leave. I'm in the yeshiva already for 3 months. He says, I saw when you prayed during the Amida, you were traveling for the entire globe. You're circling the globe. You're going from Australia to London, to Paris, to Venezuela, to Colombia. And finally, you arrived back. So I said to myself, you traveled so much. You should say the prayer. That's one story. The second story is, this is a true story. A man in Russia, a Jewish businessman who was, so to say, blamed for cheating the government. Those days in Russia, 150 years, 250 years ago, most of the business in large quantity is done with the government because they had armies to feed. They also negotiated pricing. So when you offer to sell so much and you sold less, you offer to cut wood at so many pieces, so much weight, and you did less. So there is room for cheating. And of course, you got to be careful. And a rival, came up with witnesses that he was cheating in his contract with the government. So he had no idea what to do because good attorneys will not help against the government, against the Tsar. So he traveled to the Rebbe. So the Rebbe says, tell me what they blame you for. And he's shared. And the Rebbe says, this is the answer you're going to tell them. Tell them such and such. And then the man says, okay, but what if they answer me in this way? And the Rebbe says, okay, give him that answer. And he gives them an answer. What if they say that way? And the rabbi says, okay, give him that answer. And what if they say this? The rabbi said to him, don't worry, they're not going to say that. So the man says, Rabbi, how do you know? He says, because those are attorneys and government officials are not Jewish. They do not pray the Amida prayer. They have no time to think and delve and dissect all the details of their life the way you do. They will never think about these ideas. You got it?
I got
Okay.
it.
So the idea is that when you want to do positive and the evil thoughts enter, and it's very hard to control. Is it possible for us to control our thoughts? People, unlike, and I shared that before, and that's so important to share now. People think that doing evil is bad. Thinking evil is also bad, but I'm sorry, speaking evil. But thinking, who cares? Nobody hears about it. Nobody knows about it. In truth, the closer you are to the soul, the worse damage you create. Because when you do action, let's say I stole, or let's say I did something wrong, I can fix it. In speech, it's to a lesser degree to fix it, but you could fix it. You can ask forgiveness. You can say something to atone. Thinking, you are touching the soul itself because it's closer to the soul. Therefore, it affects in a very, very negative way the soul itself. Why is it important to share? Because I'm going to share with you some stories to that. There was a rabbi who immigrated to Israel, and he used to work as a mason. He used to build homes, putting bricks one on top of the other. But because he was a very righteous man, people didn't think that it's deserving for him to stand outside in the heat with a big hat. You know, he had a hat to protect himself from the sun and schlepping those bricks and climbing up. So the friends found them work in an office. He was a mathematician, so he knew math, and he can run the books there. So when they came to him with that, so he said, I'm sorry, I knew that I did not know the man. I know his children and grandchildren. He's a famous name in Israel in the early 40s, 50s. He says, I don't want to. They said to him, why? He says, you know, when I walk the bricks and I build the wall, all that's involved in the action, in this labor, is my hands, action. So I can think about myself and God. I can think about Torah messages. I can contemplate on my life and devote my thought into holy and positive. You're going to take me to an office with air conditioning, and you're going to make my brains work all day for mundane activities. I don't want that. I want my brain to be connected to God. Now, it's not a sin to work in an office, but I'm just sharing with you the way he saw things, and he felt that the benefit of walking out in the sun, laying bricks on top of each other, is much better choice than staying in the office. The other point I wanted to make is, there were two friends going on a path, and then they had an opportunity to sin, and one of them couldn't hold back. He wasn't as holy as we want to, so he sinned. The other guy did not sin. As they're walking for an hour later, the other guy turned to him and says, you know, the whole time I'm thinking, how is it possible that you lowered yourself to such a level to sin? And the guy that sinned turned to him and he says, look at the difference between you and me. I sinned for 1 minute. You took the sin, put it in your brains for an entire hour. So which one you think is in a graver situation? And the idea is that thought is way, way closer to the soul, therefore less control, and more importantly, much, much more effective than ourselves. If I were to explain, as the rabbi is going to talk and dissect the idea of thinking, there are two aspects of thinking, of thought. One thing that I can share at this point is, just like speech is a communication mechanism between me and you, if I want you to know how I feel, or what you to know, or I want you to know what I expect from you. I speak to you. Thought is a communication skill between me and my soul. People think that thought is the essence of the human being, but the thinking process is actually a mechanism that allows me to express myself to my soul. It's not part of my soul. It's not part of my essence. It's very important to know that. So again, if I want to understand the idea of thinking, the thought process, just like when I speak to you, you know what I want, what I expect. I tell you exactly what I want. Is the same as the thought process to my soul. So if I get angry at somebody, it's impossible to differentiate, to separate between the thought and the anger itself, the emotions. Is that correct? As soon as I get angry, I'm thinking about how angry I am. I'm thinking how I to make sure it doesn't happen, how to punish, how to revenge, etc. The rabbi is going to tell us that the thought is something that is added to my emotions, and it's not part of my emotions. And therefore, to a certain degree, that aspect of thought is in full control. I can decide not to think even though I'm angry. In other words, sometimes anger is a legitimate emotion. It's something that is appropriate. It does not necessitate thinking about it. I can refrain from thinking about it. Remember the light? It's hard for you to stop thinking about it, think about something else. Divert your thought process. There is another aspect of the thought which is literally part of the soul itself, and that we have no control over. But the revealed part of the thought process, the rabbi is going to tell us, is something we have full control. We can stop it, we can refrain from it, we can divert it to something else. Can we stop thinking? No. As long as my soul is in my body, I'm going to think. If I will tell you not to think about a polar bear, I guarantee you won't be able to. And the reason is that's part of my soul. I have no control over it. But then to allow the thought process to be part of my emotions, that's something I can stop. So if I want to think evil thoughts during prayer, if I want to divert my mindset during prayer, I can control it. I can try my best to control it after a lot of exercise. That's the points the rabbi is going to make. Let's read it so we can finish the chapter, hopefully.
Rabbi, is this appropriate? Don't show anger only when you're not.
Very good point.
What?
Show anger only when you're not angry. Let me show it then.
All right, good point.
Sure.
We are in the middle of page 186. His craving is limited only in that, in the case of a craving for a prohibited matter, it does not enter his mind to transgress in actual practice, God forbid. But thoughts of sin, which are in certain respects, as explained in the previous chapter, more heinous than actual sin, can manage to rise to his mind and to distract him from Torah and divine service. As I said, in a negative way or a positive, in a mitzvah or a prohibition. As our sages say, there are three sins so difficult to avoid that no man is safe from transgressing daily: thoughts of sin, lack of concentration in prayer, and slanderous gossip. Thus, the Beinoni is included in the generalization that no man avoids thoughts of sin. The rabbi tells us, based on the Talmud, there are three sins no man can avoid every single day. One of them is the thought of committing a sin, to hurt someone, to not tell the truth, even if I didn't do it. Those thoughts enter our mind. I don't know about you, I'm speaking about myself. The second one is not to be able to concentrate during prayer, not to know what I'm saying. Nobody is perfect to say the entire prayer appropriately. I shared it with you many times. And the third one is gossip or slander. No one can avoid it every day, at least once a day. Of course, I have to minimize it. It's not a place to justify this behavior, but just that the reality is that in these three, all three stem from the mind. The thoughts or during prayer, or negative, inappropriate thoughts. So negative, inappropriate thoughts is a prohibition. The thoughts that disturb my prayer is preventing us from doing a mitzvah, a positive commandments. I told you there are two categories. And the third one, the rabbi is not bringing, but the third one is slander, which also is a sin.
Lack of concentration in prayer. I believe I'm not misrepresenting. You don't understand all the words that is that you're praying. You don't necessarily concentrate, but you're praying, which is a positive aspect.
So prayer has two aspects. One aspect of prayer is just to connect to God, to thank God, to ask for my needs. It's a general mitzvah, and that the very fact that we go and pray, we fulfill. But then there is the word in Hebrew is called iyun tefillah. Look, you know what iyun le'ayen means? Concentration, to concentrate. When I studied in yeshiva, there were 2 tracks every day. 4 hours for iyun and 1 hour for girsa. Girsa means just to go fast, to know the topics and study the Talmud. So you'd study probably 4 pages a week. Iyun, we didn't even do a half a page in a week because you go to the dissecting it. Iyun tefillah, they call it, the concentration of prayer. There is another mitzvah to know what you're saying. Some parts of prayers, if you don't think about the words, you do not fulfill the mitzvah. Shema Yisrael is one of them. The first 3 blessings of the Amidah are also one of them. If you didn't think about what you're saying, you're supposed to go back and say it again. The rest of the prayer is appropriately to do iyun tefillah, to know what you're speaking to a king. You just it's impossible. Even though you learn it by heart, it doesn't mean you can say it while you're thinking about your cruise, or about fixing the air conditioner in the house. However, so in other words, a Beinoni is one of those that they cannot escape those thoughts every day. However, the impression retained in his mind from his meditation during prayer and God's greatness and the natural love and fear of God hidden in the right part of his heart enables them to prevail over and dominate the evil animal soul's craving, preventing the evil from gaining the supremacy and dominion over the city, the body, and carrying out its craving from the potential to the actual by clothing itself in the organs of the body in actual speech and deed. Says the Rebbe, those thoughts, we have no control, just like the heart. Those thoughts, the mind cannot be controlled because it's a very close garment to the soul. Therefore, it's very powerful and we have very little control over it. However, we can stop it from moving forward to continue thinking. So the first idea that enters our mind, if it's a negative way, there is nothing to feel bad about. It's not a sin. Contemplating over it, allowing it to express itself in speech or action, that's a Beinoni will not allow. Furthermore, even in the mind alone, with respect to sinful thoughts, the evil has not the dominion and power to cause him, God forbid, to think such thoughts consciously. In other words, it enters your mind because you have no control over that, just like a polar bear. But you can say, it's not right, let's stop it. So the second thought is what counts, and I think I shared that with you before, last time. The second thoughts, a Beinoni will not allow. That is, to cause the mind to accept willingly, God forbid, the evil thought that rises of its own accord, unbidden from the heart or to the mind, as explained above. I see that too. Okay, let's finish the chapter. Instead, immediately upon the thoughts rising to the mind, he, the Beinoni, thrusts it aside, as it were, with both hands, and averts his mind from it. The instant he realizes that it is an evil thought, he will refuse to accept it even as a subject for mere conscious thought and will certainly not entertain the notion of acting on it, God forbid, or even speaking of it. Why? For he who willingly indulges in such thought is deemed a Rasha at that moment, while the Beinoni is never wicked even for a single moment. Obviously, then, the Beinoni would not willingly entertain the evil thoughts. So again, to summarize, there are two aspects to the thoughts. The first aspect is it's an internal garment of the soul, and therefore we have very little control. So the evil soul will push through the thought evil thinking. We are not responsible for them. Our responsibility lies after the first thought, the second thought. Are we going to continue contemplate and indulge in them or not? If we push it away, that's the Beinoni. If we don't allow it to be expressed in action and speech, that's the Beinoni. If God forbid to allow to indulge in them, that's where we are out of the category of a Beinoni. The discussion of his mastery over his animal soul has thus far centered on matters pertaining to man's relationship with God. It now moves to another area. The rabbi is going to talk about everything we just spoke between man to man. So too in matters between man and his fellow man, the Beinoni will not grant expression in thought, speech, and action to any evil feeling towards his fellow. As soon as there rises from his heart to his mind any animosity or hatred, God forbid, or jealousy, anger, or a grudge, and the like, he will bar them from his mind and will, refusing even to think of them. On the contrary, his mind will prevail over and dominate the feelings of his heart to do the exact opposite of that which the heart desires. So someone cheated me, someone is great success, greater than me, I have a very evil thought, I will stop it, because it's not the right thing, that's not God's way. Namely, to conduct himself toward his fellow with the quality of kindness, as opposed to the quality of severity where hatred and anger originate, and to display towards his fellow a disproportionate love in suffering from him to the farthest extreme, without being provoked into anger, God forbid, or to take revenge in kind, God forbid, even without anger, but on the contrary, to repay offenders with favors, as taught in the Zohar, that we would learn from the example of Joseph conduct with his brothers when he repaid them for the suffering they brought upon him with kindness and favors. I want to share one more point before we conclude. That's the end of the chapter. Joseph, they sold him as they wanted to kill him. Then they threw him to a dungeon with scorpions and snakes. Then they sold him as a slave. Yet when they met them, he was able to repay them in kind. Yet he did not, because he said it's all from God, and therefore I have no. That's why Yosef is the only man mentioned in the Torah as tzaddik, righteous. There is no other person, not Yaakov a tzaddik, not Avraham a tzaddik, not David a tzaddik. The only one called in the Torah tzaddik is Yosef. And the reason is because he was able to tame his urges to act in kind to those so close to him. I just want to show it to you because it's very appropriate to our Torah portion. Last week we read the Bereshit. We read about the first time man got angry. You know what happened? The anger caused the jealousy he had to kill Cain. Cain, the Torah tells us that Cain got angry at his brother. And a verse later we read that Cain killed Abel because of jealousy. But in between, when he's angry at his brother, we read that God speaks to Cain. And God said to him exactly the point we're studying. God said to him, why are you so, lama naflu panecha? Why are you so angry? Im teitiv se'et. If you want to do good, contain it and move it away. Ve'im lo, and if not, lapetach chatat rovetz. Sin is going to enter yourself and it will take you over. In other words, God says to Cain, jealousy, anger is part and parcel of your DNA. I created you that way, but you have two choices. One is to push it away. Say to yourself, it's not good for me. It's not good for the universe. It's not what God wants me. Stop being angry. Stop getting jealous. If not, he says, the sin will enter you and take you over. A verse later is when he kills his brother because he refuses to allow his brains to rule over the heart. This is the essence of the story of God speaking to Cain just before he goes to kill Abel. Just we need to be very careful because we need to realize that anger, jealousy, all those thoughts, the idea of being a Benoni is to realize that they will enter, those thoughts enter our mind. Do not indulge in them. Don't continue thinking, contemplating, and instead stop it and say to yourself, it's wrong, it's inappropriate. And with that, we'll conclude chapter 12. Next week, God willing, we'll study chapter 13. Thank you so much.